Let's go ahead and see what Duesenberg's about. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, a viewer of the show was going to buy a Duesenberg, so he asked if he could new guitar day one, and I said, sure, never checked one out, so we might as well. Because to be honest, I don't know a lot about these, but I did some research. I was able to find the company was first founded in 1986 in Hanover, Germany, which is kind of interesting because that's around the time Gibson and Fender both got sold. That's when PRS started to emerge as well, but these guys were on a completely different continent. However, in 2004, they opened up a new USA production facility in Fullerton, California, which isn't too far from Fender. But this company is all about blending Art Deco elements into serious players' instruments. And a lot of their recent fame actually comes from a Japanese artist using one of their models, Shiina Ringo. Their most popular body style is known as the Starplayer TV, but they also have a senior. I'm a real big fan of the Alliance series signature of Jeff DeRosa. That's got an awesome finish, but they also have a Paloma, there's a Falcon, I'm not sure how you pronounce that one, a Caribou, the Double Cat. Okay, I have heard of the Duesenberg Double Cat because of the whole modern DC Gibsons. But that's as much history that I can teach you. Let's go ahead and talk about the Duesenberg experience. So unboxing it just now, this is a really premium case. It's got like a cloth exterior. You've got like a plastic pleather type thing going on around the edge as like a binding. I mean, this is a really fancy looking case. I like that so far. The pack job I feel was a bit subpar. They've got these cardboard inserts, which secures the case so much, but it's still kind of flopped around. Let's go ahead and see what model we are looking at today. That is quite a sight in person. Like, you can see these things in photos, right? But when you actually see it in person to see everything that they've done here, yeah, it definitely gives you Gretsch White Penguin vibes, that's for sure. But yes, this is their most popular body shape. This is the Starplayer TV, which is kind of a strange name, but it's all white. It's semi-hollow constructed, but if you check it out, we got pearloid binding. So yeah, very fancy. And then, I noticed something wrong right away. I knew that box wasn't secure. Something about our pickup screw must have lost its spring, but I have to tear it apart anyway, so we should be able to fix that, no problem. But even the fret wire even looks like it has a little bit of a gold tint to it. Those are nice and shiny, so it seems like they know what they're doing as far as that goes. But you also have that continuation of the binding along the edge of the neck. And then we've got that Art Deco style Duesenberg headstock. It kind of reminds me of Grover Imperial tuner tips, the whole design that's stair-stepped. But instead of having the pearloid binding around here, it looks like they just exposed the maple of the neck. But I gotta say, paintwork looking a little bit sloppy up here. But it's really interesting how this has a carved top, but then the back of it is completely flat. So I kind of get a mix of an arch top with a solid body in that aspect. And I would say it's actually got a pretty good weight to it. The guitar itself doesn't feel like it's very heavy, but it's probably like all the trem systems and all the fancy gold blingage. But we've got kind of a cool serial number system on here. It's just a brass plaque. But now let's talk about another weird thing about Duesenbergs, their prices. So this thing right here, believe it or not, it costs $3,533.87. Yes, that is the exact price before tax. And all of their guitars have weird prices like that. Like, what is up with that, Duesenberg? It's not as bad as Rickenbacker not allowing dealers to actually post the price on some of their websites. But I found that very strange, and they will not allow dealers to discount at all. I'm curious if that's why some shops choose not to stock these guys. But I'm sure there's two different sides to the stories. Maybe it's supposed to be a $4,000 guitar, and they just want to cut it down to exactly what they have to make. It just kind of strikes me as weird as a consumer buying the product. But the reason why you buy boutique stuff like this is the way it plays. Because we've got some interesting pickups we'll have to learn about today. They might look the same, but the spec sheets say they are different. But let's check out our case candy. Which, by the way, this case is made by GWW in Costa Rica. But this was the hang tag that was on the guitar when I got it. Looks like we can get these in two different colors, Venetian white and an ebony finish. You get a little envelope that contains all the different Allen keys we might need. A fancy polishing cloth. A nice little owner's manual that has a lot of different little pamphlets in here telling you about their whole plec process that they've been doing since 2009. You've got a warranty with matching serial number. And I really like this, a complete spec card included with the guitar, as well as explaining everything. That'll come in handy. Case keys, a 7-in-1 tool with instructions. That's where Gibson goes wrong. They just give it to you and expect you to know what everything does. So this one, it's nice. It's also their company logo. A welcome card, a second polishing cloth, another thank you card, some stickers, and a funny gag gift. Really? Do they? Yeah, they give you Duesenberg Band-Aids. Okay. I like this company now. Just in case you play until your fingers bleed. So besides the weird price and needing a little bit more packaging in their boxes, so far I'm impressed. It seems like a pretty nice guitar. Let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take a look at its parts and specs before we get to a playing demo. Inside the Duesenberg, I've uncovered some really fun things and new innovations that I think all manufacturers should use. So let's go ahead and dive into here. So when I was first reading the spec sheets, I noticed that they said these were different pickups, but I was like, how can that be? Because they both look the same, like some sort of a P90 type thing. But they called it the Phonica Domino P90 in the neck, and the Phonica Grand Vintage Humbucker in the bridge. So essentially, these are just decorative covers. Just reads Duesenberg, Germany on the back here, but the way it's constructed, having the pole pieces in the center, means this is basically a humbucker-sized P90. So kind of like Gibson's P94. However, when you look at the bridge pickup, that's when you can tell, oh yeah, that is indeed a humbucker. So that's kind of cool how they trick you like that, just by using these fancy pickup covers essentially that just look like old vintage microphones. But as far as the routes, that's what they're looking like. We've got a mystery third screw. These other two are for your height adjustment springs and screws. The bridge pickup looks like a big screaming face going, ah! But the reason that they have this additional route right here is so this wire doesn't affect how high the pickup is set. Because if you're trying to lower it down and this is pushing it up higher, you won't have good results. So that's kind of cool. But these have a laminated spruce top with a laminated maple body. You can kind of see some of the wooden layers right here, because it's covered up everywhere else with the perloid binding, even the F-holes, which is impressive. Before we can get the readings of this, we need to understand our toggle switch on this one. It's a rotary switch with 4 different options. I'm not sure which is which at this time, but it's supposed to be neck, bridge, and then 2 different combinations of the pickups. So one is at 5.48 k ohms, the other one is also at that, but then we switch down to a 3.33 and an 8.3-ish. So we'll have to figure out which is which in the demo, but I would assume maybe this is neck and that's bridge, and then you got your 2 in-betweens. As far as the rest of the controls go, it's just a master volume and a master tone. These knobs are pretty interesting. They're knurled, but then they have this section right here that helps you grip it even further, and so you know where it actually is. But the pickguard assembly is interesting. So we've got the Duesenberg branding right here, and you've got like a pinstripe slash binding something going around it. But you have their whole stair-stepped logo. But then they have like a finger rest or something drilled into the top here that A, helps to secure your pickguard, probably so they can put Duesenberg on it without having to put another screw hole in those direct locations. I was really curious what this was going to end up being, but yeah, it is a completely separate piece. But I know this looks like a pickguard, and it had me fooled too, but it's actually a control access plate too. So here's all your electronics. It looks like it's branded Goldo or Goldie, something like that. But this other one has slightly different branding. It looks like they're 250K pots with maybe a treble bleed, but here you can see some of the maple body wood grain. Well, let's grab the endoscope to check it out even further. So through the F-hole, you can see the model Starplayer TV, German and USA registered trademarks. Looks like we get some sort of a signature of the person responsible and the Duesenberg branding. As far as actually inside the guitar, you know, all things considered, that actually looks pretty clean. So we've got some sort of a block right here of wood that you can secure the top strap button into. And here we can see our laminated sides, and that's a spruce top here. And then what we've got on the back here is just the flat back of maple. It's actually quite ingenious how big this sticker is, because when you're looking in the F-hole, you only see that sticker. It covers everything else up. That's a smart move. Because the maple that they use, I'm sure it's fine, but it's kind of ugly. Very splotchy. Whereas the maple on the sides, it actually looks pretty nice. It's got some good wood grain. Definitely has a little bit of flame figuring as well too. But it looks like they've got another piece of wood right here that joins the center block to the edges. And then you've got a little bit of bracing up here and a little bit of glue seepage. So, not too badly constructed on this end. Let's see how it is over here. Looks like pretty much more of the same stuff. We can see a back plate and some other electronics, but we can see that a little bit later. But over here is our output jack, and basically just the continuation of our ground wire there going through to go to the tailpiece. We just saw that. And also, due to this being a carved top, but this plastic not being carved, they use some felt spacers on the back of it to kind of help make up for that. So I'm betting, once this is installed again and you know to look for it, there might be a very, very tiny gap here. But you would only notice that had you taken it apart. And in fact, now I think that's why they go for this gold bar besides making it look cool, because the pickguard might crack if it had like direct pressure right here with the whole curve. That's a cool way that they designed that whole control plate slash pickguard. Okay, so now let's learn about our bridge and tailpiece. So it's very similar to like a Gibson ABR1 in the fact that it is a post and a thumb wheel, but it does have a stud within the body, so you don't have to worry as much about lean. But the thumb wheel part moves as well as the stud. So if you ever have to adjust your action, sometimes on an ABR1, if it gets so low, this will start sticking up. I think that's the reason why they have that. That way you're not getting poked. Or I suppose you could also make the argument that it helps you get a wider range of adjustment should you need it. As far as the bridge itself, it looks very similar to like a Gibson ABR1, but it's Duesenberg branded, and stock from the factory, it has the screws facing this way. To be honest, with everything else so advanced on this, I'm surprised not to see roller saddles. But when I had ordered this, I just figured it was like some sort of a Bigsby that was branded differently, but no, this thing was a lot different than a Bigsby. So we've got the whole snake bite like we normally do, but they've got two different sized little brass spacers. Well, I'm not sure if they're brass, they're just, brass colored. And those do not secure to the guitar at all, except for the mounting screw, but that raises the tremolo system up a little bit. But then we've got the actual tremolo system itself. They call this the Duesenberg Radiator. It looks just like a Bigsby B7, right? But it's a little bit shorter, so maybe more like a B5. I had to take it completely off because it's not on a hinge system. I couldn't just lift it up or anything. That's like a solid metal bar down here that your strap button goes into to secure it to the edge of the guitar, which you can see down here as well as your grounding off wire. But what made me instantly fall in love with this is this. The ball ends of the strings actually go through like a stop bar stud right here. So normally a Bigsby looks like this. They just have a little barb sticking out and you gotta put the ball end of the string on there, hope it doesn't fly off. They're a pain in the butt. That's why they make a spoiler system that you can put on it to make it easy, but this just comes from the factory with that built in. And this has a spring just like a Bigsby would, but it has a slightly different mounting to the bracket itself. And then obviously you can adjust the tension of your arm right here. Now that I think about it, that's probably the true reason why their Vibrola has those spacers underneath it. That way the system's not actually resting on top, causing impressions. You just have that small little spacer doing that, and it keeps it nice and level, because that is a very straight vibrato right here. But this angle really helps show you just how carved that top is. So it might look familiar, but there's a few improvements that they did here that just makes it so much more user-friendly. I'm not entirely too sure how the D is secured to the top. It might be glued on, might be barbed. I'm not going to mess around with that too much, but you can see your multiply binding as well as the perloid outer layer. It's interesting. It's not going to be everybody's favorite look, but it works well on a white finish in my opinion, and I would say the binding job is pretty impressive. There's only one small area where I found some unevenness. I'm not sure if there's a flake of dust or the binding didn't get smoothed and sanded properly, but just a couple of small bumps right here, but you really got to be looking for that. I also saw some sort of a scuff right here, likely caused by the pickguard material. Now that's completely covered over when it's all installed, so it's not an issue, but it's something I noticed. But now we can move on from our body to our neck. It's a maple neck with a Indian rosewood fretboard. They call these their wing inlays, even though it's just, again, the continuation of their headstock pretty much. Maybe not my favorite inlays in the world, but it works really well with this guitar. But we've got 22 jumbo frets with a 25.5-inch scale length, paired with a 12-inch fretboard radius, but with a rather skinny nut width, 1.64 inches, and that increases to 2.04 by the 12th. We've got a first fret neck depth of 0.82 and only 0.95 by the 12th. That is definitely kind of a small and thin neck. And now that I've measured it, I definitely feel it. That is a pretty tiny neck, but that'll probably make playing jazzy stuff very easy. But here you can see the side marker inlays as well as the continuation of the perloid binding. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. It's a rounded C, but rather small. As far as the face of the headstock goes, this is what it looks like when you have the truss rod cover removed. The cover itself says, you guessed it, Duesenberg, with some additional writing on the back. And then I love these tuners so much. So normally when you have a Bigsby, you can slacken your strings and take the ball ends off and do your setup, cleaning and whatnot. These might not look like it, but they're actually Fender style. You know, the poke it down, wrap it around kind, so they're really easy to remove. That's such a great feature paired with their tremolo system. I think the way they get away with that, making it look so natural, is they only have one side that's actually slotted. The rest is all rounded. The spec sheet calls these the Art Diego tuners. They're stair-step just like the headstock over here, but it's a nice rigid feeling, but I think it was probably mainly done for the aesthetics of it all. Then you also got a big D up here, and they're utilizing a dual action truss rod. Looks like it uses an Allen key wrench for adjustment. Now let's move on to the back side. We're actually going to start with the output jack plate. It's got some more Art Deco stylings on the edge of it, so it's a little bit fancier than normal. And they utilize a magic strap button that apparently is part of their strap lock system. It's got a pretty interesting shape to it. But earlier I had hinted at some paint issues. Now these are relatively minor issues. I'm only pointing it out because that's what I do. I do in-depth documentations of guitars. So this one, when you get it in the light just right, you can see some splotches underneath it, like the wood wasn't flushly sanded. And after looking at the type of maple that they were using for the back, I think that might just be their problem. The lacquer is sinking within the wood grain, but you can definitely see quite a few areas of that phenomenon when you're really inspecting for it. But it could also just be that they need to clean the surface off a little bit better before they apply the finish, so I might be doing them a favor by pointing that out. But another area where I saw that paint didn't get scraped properly is right here. I mean, this is really nitpicky because you do have a layer of white in between the binding and that, but it just goes a little bit further. The headstock's definitely the worst offender in my opinion because you got like that chipped edge going on. That definitely should not have happened. This is another slight nitpick, but I did see a light impression right here from the factory. That was before I tore it apart. You can't blame me on that one. But now let's talk about the back plate. This thing is weird. This is actually a metal plate and it just looks like this on the inside. An interesting oval ring. We've already seen some of this. This is just your Veritone pickup selector type thing. That's one of the pickguard screws coming through, but that spruce that they're using for this is beautiful. You can tell it would have some nice figuring. You can also see that center block that we were looking at earlier, as well as the maple sides. Nothing too crazy running up the back of the neck here until we get to our tuners. These are also Duesenberg branded. Everything on here is, but our serial number is 220136. All said and done, it's just a hair over 8 pounds. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this thing sounds. So putting it on a strap, the first thing I notice is all the weight on this guitar is right here. You feel it kind of pulling itself down, but it is balanced. It just feels a lot heavier than it is on your left shoulder. But other than that, it feels pretty natural. So let's go ahead and get some tones out of it. It sounds like it's wired exactly what I was thinking. So all the way up here is going to be our neck position. Then the all the way down is our bridge. So the third position from the front is kind of what you would normally expect out of a middle position. Whereas this other combination, it seems to just be out of phase. got a nice vintage round tone to it in the bridge pickup. I like that. That's good. Now let's try our neck. That's got some good tones. Now we'll try in phase. As far as the tremolo, how much travel does it have? Very similar to a Bigsby. Like, you're not going to do any dive bombs or crazy up bends. Now that we know all about the Deusenberg Starplayer TV model, what are my final thoughts on this? Now, at first I was turned off by some of the few small finish things that could have been done better, but everything else about this I ended up actually really liking. They have some very nice modernized appointments to it. Now, it's not going to be for everybody. This pearloid binding is a little bit flashy and almost a little bit too elegant, but this really gives like jazz box vibes to it. And if not that, you can get a little bit of rockabilly going on, and it's got a great tone for rockabilly if that's what you're trying to do. But I'd definitely suggest a good strap for this, because even though it's not that heavy, it feels very heavy when you stand and play it. And honestly, I think I would suggest heavier gauge strings than what comes from the factory, because it just felt a little bit too thin. But alright, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed checking this guitar out with me today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, why don't you check out the Gretsch White Penguin? It's kind of a similar guitar, but different in its own right.